The first thing I noticed wasn't the smell of gunpowder or the acrid tang of burnt wires, it was the silence, a profound hollow quiet, that followed the deafening roar of vacuum, where the world had just been. My ears rang with a high keening whine, a phantom orchestra playing a symphony for the dead. I was pinned the steering wheel, a cruel metal jaw pressed against my chest, the scent of gasoline and pine needles thick in the air through the spider web of shattered glass that was once my windshield. I could see the flames, they were licking the twisted hood of the brand-new sedan, dancing with a hungry, vibrant orange against the deep green twilight of the Oregon forest. They'd promised me this car was a gift, a key to freedom, a way for their aging mother to reclaim her independence. But as the heat began to blister the skin on my face, I understood its true purpose. This wasn't a gift, it was a coffin, and my son, my only child, had just tried to nail it shut with me inside 6 months earlier. The silence that nearly killed me had been a different kind. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of grief that had settled over my salt-bleached cottage in the coastal town of Sea Cliff, Oregon, after my husband Arthur was lost at sea for 40 years. Our lives had been ruled by the rhythm of the tides, by the scent of brine on his skin, and the sound of his laughter echoing off the cedar-paneled walls. Without him the house was just a shell, a monument to a life that was no longer mine. My son Julian and his wife Serafina arrived like vultures dressed as saviors. "You can't stay here alone, Mom," Julian had said, his voice laced with a concern that felt rehearsed. He was a man perpetually chasing the next big tech venture, his eyes always fixed on a screen of future. I was never a part of. Serafina stood beside him, her perfectly curated sympathy looking as out of place in my rustic home as her designer handbag. She was an influencer, a job I didn't fully understand, but I knew it involved documenting a life of effortless perfection that seemed to require immense, draining effort. "Move in with us in Portland," she chimed in, her smile as bright and hard as a diamond. "We have plenty of space, you won't have to worry about a thing." It sounded like kindness in the fog of my sorrow. It felt like a lifeline. I was so tired of the quiet, so weary of the memories that ambushed me in every room. Julian mentioned the deed to the cottage just to simplify things, Mom. "For estate planning, it's a formality." He was my son, my flesh and blood, the boy whose scraped knees I'd bandaged and whose nightmares I'd soothed. I trusted him. I signed the papers without a second thought. The shift was immediate, and brutal politeness was the initial veneer, thin as ice on a winter puddle. Serafina called me Eleanor, but the name dripped with a cloying sweetness that was worse than open contempt. My life was systematically dismantled and packed away. Arthur's collection of nautical charts, the ones we'd used to dream of sailing the world, were replaced by sterile abstract art. The worn armchair where he used to sit, its fabric still holding the faint scent of his pipe tobacco, vanished. It didn't fit the aesthetic, Serafina explained, her eyes not meeting mine. I was moved from my master bedroom with its sweeping view of the churning Pacific to a small guest room at the back of their minimalist house. It overlooked a concrete wall and smelled perpetually of damp and bleach. My meals appeared on the kitchen island, covered in plastic wrap. Long after they had finished eating in their formal dining room, they began talking about me, as if I weren't there, their voices carrying from the other room. "She's so forgetful lately," Serafina would sigh loud enough for me to hear. I had to remind her 3 times to take her vitamins. It was a lie. I had taken them myself that morning. It was a calculated campaign of erasure, a slow, methodical gaslighting designed to make me doubt my own mind. They were positioning me as a burden, a fading relic whose care was a noble sacrifice. The truth, I would soon learn, was far more sinister. The first whisper of it came from behind a closed door. I was bringing Julian a cup of tea, my hand steady despite the growing tremor in my soul. "I can't stand having her here," Serafina's voice hissed, sharp and venomous. "She smells of old things, mothballs, and decay. As long as she's breathing, we have to keep up this charade. When is she going to die? Already the policy is active patience." Julian's voice was low, placating. "It has to look natural. We can't rush it and risk the payout." I froze, the porcelain cup rattling in its saucer. "Policy, payout." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. I backed away, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I locked my door that night, a flimsy barrier against the monsters who shared my blood. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted to profit from my death. 2 days later the gift arrived, a sleek, silent, top-of-the-line electric sedan, a deep metallic blue that mirrored the cold depths of the ocean. "For you, Mom," Julian announced, dangling the key FOB like a prize, "so you can get out more, visit your friends, be independent again." Serafina stood behind him, her arms crossed, a smug, predatory smile playing on her lips. "Just last week she'd suggested my driver's license should be revoked because of my cognitive decline. Now they were handing me the keys to a high-performance vehicle. We even added you to our insurance." Julian added, his casual tone a masterpiece of deceit, made it official. Official. The word landed like a shovel full of dirt on a coffin. They began to orchestrate my life with a chilling new purpose. They encouraged me to drive, suggesting scenic routes along the treacherous winding coastal highway. Serafina would pack a lunch, a new wool blanket tucked into the back seat. Julian would fuss over my seatbelt, his touch lingering a moment too long as he checked the buckle. They were creating a narrative, the confused old woman, generously cared for by her loving children who tragically lost control of her powerful new car. They brought me new pills, a mild sleep aid, Serafina said brightly, placing the unlabeled bottle on my nightstand. To help you rest. I never saw a doctor. I never saw a prescription. The pills were small and blue, and they made the world feel fuzzy at the edges, slowing my thoughts, dulling the sharp edges of my fear. One night, unable to sleep despite their aid, I tiptoed into the hallway, drawn by a sliver of light from under their bedroom door. Their voices were hushed, urgent. The bridge is the perfect spot, Julian was saying. No witnesses, and the fall is 100 feet to the rocks. The battery has to rupture on impact. A fire is essential. Are you sure the remote override will work? Serafina pressed. I don't want this traced back to us. $5 million is no good from a prison cell. I've tested the relay a dozen times. Once she's halfway across the bridge, I trigger the thermal runaway from the app. It'll be instant. A massive electrical fire. They'll find a charred frame and a tragic accident. My breath hitched in my throat. I stumbled back to my room, my body numb with a cold that had nothing to do with the Oregon chill. The car wasn't just a car, it was a bomb. The pills weren't for sleep, they were to ensure I was too sedated to react. When the fire started, they had called me a shell, but it was they who were hollowed out, consumed by a greed so vast it had devoured their humanity. They were not my children, they were my executioners, and in that moment the grief that had clouded my mind for months finally burned away, replaced by the crystal-clear, ice-cold fury of a woman who had decided she was not ready to die. Their biggest mistake was underestimating me. They saw a frail, grieving widow. They didn't see the woman who had navigated life storms alongside a fisherman, the woman who knew how to read the currents and spot a squall on the horizon. They gave me 45 minutes of unsupervised time every Saturday morning when they went to a trendy downtown farmers market, a public performance of their wholesome lifestyle. That Saturday, I didn't tend to my wilting potted plants. I waited for the sound of their car to fade, then I moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. Their bedroom was a temple of minimalist beige, cold and impersonal, but I knew people like them. Their secrets wouldn't be hidden in plain sight. They'd be tucked away, cataloged with the same obsessive detail they applied to their lives. In the bottom drawer of Julian's desk, beneath a stack of old tech manuals, I found a locked metal box. It took me less than a minute with one of Arthur's old fishing knives to pry it open. Inside was a heavy leather-bound folder. My name was on the tab, Eleanor Vance. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first document was a life insurance policy number 73B for a 9 insured Eleanor May Vance, benefit amount $5 million. My eyes scanned the page, my blood turning to ice water. The primary beneficiary was Julian Vance, the secondary Serafina, but it was the last page that stole my breath. There, on the signature line, was my name rendered in a careful, elegant cursive. It was a masterful forgery, a near-perfect imitation of my hand, but it was wrong. I knew the way my E looped the sharp, definitive cross of my T. This was the signature of a stranger, a ghost, who had signed my death warrant. Deeper in the folder, the plot unspooled in a series of printed emails between Julian and an obscure out-of-state insurance firm. He referred to me as his ailing mother in rapid cognitive and physical decline. He inquired specifically about payouts for accidental death, including single vehicle incidents involving fire. There was a receipt for an electronic device, a custom ignition relay purchased from a shady online marketplace in Eastern Europe. The delivery address was this house. They had built my tomb out of paper and ink, every detail meticulously planned. I photographed every single page with my old smartphone, my fingers moving with a surgeon's precision. Then I put everything back, closing the box, sliding the drawer shut, leaving no trace of my discovery. I walked back to my room, the evidence of burning weighed on my phone, and I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was not a victim. Her eyes were not filled with tears, but with a hard, brilliant light. This was no longer about survival, this was about justice. I scrolled through my contacts, my finger hovering over a name I hadn't called in years. Margaret Maggie Reed, attorney at law, retired. We had been inseparable as girls, two wild children roaming the Oregon coast. Life had pulled us apart, but we never broke the bond. She answered on the second ring, her voice as sharp and no nonsense as I remembered. Maggie Reed. Maggie. I breathed, my own voice sounding foreign. It's Eleanor. Eleanor Vance. A pause. Then Ellie. My God, is everything all right? You sound. I looked at the locked phone in my hand, at the digital ghosts of their betrayal. No, I said, my voice finally finding its steel, but I'm about to be Maggie. Arrived 3 days later driving a beat-up Subaru that looked like it had survived a war. She was a storm in human form with a mane of silver hair, eyes like chips of granite, and a blazer that meant business. She hugged me hard, her embrace a fortress. We didn't waste time with pleasantries on my small kitchen table. She laid out the case like a battlefield map. I told her everything, my voice low and steady as I recounted the overheard whispers, the forged signature, the blue pills, the electric coffin. Waiting in the garage, I showed her the photos on my phone. She listened, her expression growing colder and harder with every word. When I finished, she tapped a long, unmanicured finger on the table. The arrogant, greedy fools, she muttered. They documented their own conspiracy. It's a prosecutor's dream. She handed me a device no bigger than a sugar cube, a digital audio recorder. Keep it on you at all times. Turn it on whenever they're near. They think you're fading, Ellie. They'll get sloppy, they'll talk, and we will be listening. Her plan was simple and brutal. We would not confront them. We would not give them a chance to destroy the evidence. We would let them walk deeper into the trap they had set for me. Maggie contacted a trusted former colleague, not at the local police department, but at the regional FBI field office in Portland, specializing in cybercrime and interstate fraud. The out-of-state insurance policy and the imported electronic device gave them jurisdiction. For 2 weeks, I became the finest actress of my life. I played the part of the fading matriarch they so desperately wanted to see. I shuffled my feet. I let sentences drift off into confusion. I forgot where I'd put my reading glasses. While they were sitting on my head, I stared at the television for hours. The screen blanked. Their confidence swelled. Their whispers grew bolder, and the recorder in my pocket captured every damning word. She almost tried to put a metal fork in the microwave. Today, Serafina said one evening, the recording catching the sound of her smug laugh. She's completely gone. It's almost time. The trip to the coast on Saturday is the perfect opportunity. Everything is set. Julian's voice replied chillingly calm. The bridge, just after sunset. It will be beautiful, in a way tragic. The night before the planned trip, as a coastal storm raged outside, I put Maggie's final instructions into motion. At 3 a.m., I slipped out of the house. I wore the dark coat I had worn to Arthur's memorial. I carried nothing but my purse, the recorder, and a manila envelope containing hard copies of Maggie's initial brief. I left a single note on the polished kitchen island right where my lonely plastic-wrapped meals were always placed. It read, "You thought the silence was my weakness. It was my witness." A nondescript sedan was waiting for me at the corner, just as Maggie had promised. The driver, a grim-faced federal agent, didn't speak. He just nodded and drove me into the stormy darkness, away from the life I had built and the children who had tried to burn it to the ground. They found my empty room at dawn. They found my note. Their panic, I was later told, was immediate, but it was too late. At 8 a.m., as they were frantically trying to figure out where their multi-million-dollar asset had gone, 2 teams of FBI agents, accompanied by a state police bomb squad, executed simultaneous search warrants on their home and the headquarters of the shady insurance firm in Delaware. The evidence was overwhelming. The agents found the folder in Julian's desk. They found the custom app on his phone, the one designed to trigger the thermal runaway. The device itself was located by the bomb squad, expertly wired to the car's main battery array, a silent, deadly passenger. The audio recordings from my tiny device were the final irrefutable proof. The jury would later hear Julian and Serafina in their own voices calmly plotting my murder down to the last detail. The arrests were swift and silent. There was no dramatic confrontation. They were taken from their beige sanctuary in handcuffs, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. The media frenzy was instantaneous. Portland tech entrepreneur and influencer wife charged in elaborate murder-for-profit plot against elderly mother. I watched it all unfold from a quiet, secure apartment Maggie had arranged overlooking a peaceful harbor. I never had to set foot in the courtroom. I was the ghost of their trial. My presence felt in every document, every photograph, every recorded syllable. The trial lasted 6 days. Their defense was pathetic. They tried to claim it was all a fantasy, a thought experiment that had gotten out of hand. They attempted to paint me as a manipulative, delusional old woman, but the evidence was a mountain they could not move. The recording sealed their fate. When the jury heard Serafina laugh about my impending death, a collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. They were found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and use of an explosive device in the commission of a felony. The judge, a woman with eyes as stern as Maggie's, gave them the maximum sentence, life in prison with no possibility of parole. I live by the harbor now. It's a small place, but the windows are wide, and they let in the sea air. I have Arthur's old nautical charts on the wall, and I rise with the sun to watch the fishing boats head out to sea. I am surrounded not by a suffocating silence, but by a peaceful quiet of my own making. The story they tried to write for me ended in a blaze of their own making, but my story Continues, I write it every day in a simple journal with a pen that flows smooth and clear. It's a story of survival, yes, but it is more than that. It is a testament to the fact that you can try to erase a woman, you can gaslight her, dismiss her, and plot her end, but you can never truly extinguish her truth. They saw a frail old woman, a relic to be discarded. They failed to see the steel in my spine, forged in the storms of a long life. They thought my value could be measured in dollars, a sum to be collected upon my death, but a life's worth is not found on a policy document. It is etched in the wisdom of our years, the resilience of our spirit, and the quiet dignity with which we refuse to be silenced. They buried themselves under the weight of their own greed, and I was reborn in the fire they lit for me, walking out of the ashes not as a victim, but as the author of my own final chapter, a chapter that is still being written, one peaceful, deliberate, and victorious sunrise at a time.